The Sales Proformance Show, your source of inspiration in the world of sales and business development. Here we blend cutting-edge sales strategies with personal development, helping you achieve not just professional success, but also personal fulfillment. You'll hear from the experts to help unlock your true potential. And now here's your host, David Sliman.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I am your host, David Sliman, and I am super excited today. You know, on this show, we talk a lot about creating a great company culture. And we always do that through leadership. And today we have a guest who's an executive chief revenue officer. And if you currently are an executive or you're aspiring a leadership role, this is the guy you want to listen to. He came up through the ranks through Home Depot. He's a father of four, pickleball champion. Right, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
And I was lucky enough to work with him really on a sales cohort that was fantastic. So, Jeff Lucido, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sliman. I'm happy to be here.
Listen, man, you've come up through the ranks. You got to share with everybody just a brief overview, your professional journey, some of the highlights, the milestones, the experience, and really what's shaped your career at this point.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. I always worked, so we could go all the way back to when I was stocking shelves at the local grocery store or when I had my own landscape business that I named after myself. But we'll probably start when I actually had like a professional job. And that was about to graduate college and got a job at Home Depot's corporate offices. And sort of worked my way through there for 5 or 6 years and was lucky enough to get selected to be part of their Six Sigma program. And that's a process improvement methodology taken from GE, brought over to Home Depot. And so that was really fortunate to do that. So that opened up a lot of doors for me at Home Depot. And that sort of took me into getting married and moving. And we really weren't ready to move out of the Chicago area down to the Atlanta area. So that was sort of the precursor to me moving roles into Genesis Technologies, which was a managed print provider. This is copiers for businesses.
Yeah, and you were a senior VP there, right, for sales?
Yeah, VP of sales and marketing is where I wound up. You know, the journey started as like probably a call center manager, and then I managed some branches and something. You know, every time something was broke, I was fortunate to be given everything that was broken to try to fix it. And I did my best to do that. And it presented more opportunities. And I found myself heading up sales and marketing there.
Yeah. So listen, you went from a big, obviously Home Depot is a huge company, right? So you've gone through this transition where you've gone through a larger company and now you're with more of a private company. How has that experience changed, especially now being in this executive leadership role, right? And culture and motivating, and how's that experience changed?
Yeah, I think with the big companies versus small companies, you know, it's really like I think of it as a matter of like zooming in and zooming out. When you're at a big company, they zoom things in, and your job is like this zoomed in thing, and you have this, you know, small role and probably a big outcome. And the higher up you move in management or the smaller the company, things start zooming out. The same described role at a small company could have way more responsibility than in a big company.
Yeah.
And, there's pros and cons to both sides of that. And, I would give advice if someone's at a big company, I would say, you're probably not going to have that much oversight into things. So do small things really well. And then you get to a smaller company and it's like, you're going to need a fuller understanding of the business. And you're going to probably have access to a P&L, a full P&L at a different stage in your career than you are at a big, publicly traded company.
Yeah. And the tools change, right? I mean, from the side, sometimes the tools change and the strategies change. And some companies, you've got to move a little bit more and be a little more nimble. And with the larger companies, they've got the robust systems and things in place. And that's probably a bigger difference as well, right?
I think with a bigger company, it's usually like we have tools in place, so figure out how to use them. And at a smaller company, it's like, what tools should we use? And some people perform better when it's like, here's the tools, go use them. And some people are like, no, let me try and figure out the tools. And, it's not right or wrong. People are wired different ways.
So listen, you're a chief revenue officer here at IT Supplies. Sales is the focus, right? What tools right now and approaches do you take with your teams to manage them, and how do you ensure that they're pushing to obviously exceed goals or hit goals right now? What do you do with the teams right now and the tools that you use?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, in my role, you're always looking ahead. You're trying to read articles and find out what are the new tools. Where are there ways for us to do things in a different way.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of fundamentals. I listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books. The books from the 1970s and the books from 2020, they're just repackaging the same stuff. In the end, like, success is down to a few key things.
Yeah.
So I find trying not to stray from some of those things. I mean, you're working with people. You're trying to get the most out of people. People are going to perform best when they feel cared about and when you truly care for them and you're interested in them. You're communicating with them on a one-on-one basis at a natural, regularly scheduled cadence.
Yeah, it really is important, right? I mean, we've heard this before, you and I specifically, right? Arm the team and direct the team, from our buddy Mike Weinberg. And it's so true. You have to be really clear. I've seen companies who bring in or try to adapt and bring in new tools for our teams to use. And then what happens is they don't train them correctly, or maybe they don't know exactly how to maximize the tools. So I think that's one big thing. If you're a chief revenue officer or any leadership role and you're implementing a new tool, make sure you spend the time to train your teams up on the tools, because that ultimately bleeds down into the culture anyway, right? Because the more effective they are with the tools, the stronger they're going to be in their positions.
And I might even take it a step further. Find your top performers before you make the decision and bring them in on the decision. We're going through a CRM thing right now. And I remember a year ago, I was like, all right, who are some of the top producers? Let's bring them into the conversation. Get them in. We're meeting with all the top brands you'd all know from CRMs. And it's like, they're in on the calls. Well, what am I doing here? Well, I want to see what you think about it, because when we implement it, you better be on board, because if you're on board, then all the other sales reps that look up to you are going to be on board.
Yeah, that's actually a great piece of advice right there. Bring in your top performers to test the programs and give you some feedback, because sometimes as executives, we think we know what the best thing is, and there's some great feedback they can give you. I think that's priceless for sure.
And I would say do the same thing when you're doing even like a sales meeting. If you're going to introduce something new, and everyone's going to sort of be looking like, hey, I'm new. I'm going to see what the person that's the top performer, been here the longest, is going to do. Bring them in ahead of time. Hey, we're about to have a meeting. Sometimes you happen to roll your eyes when I say stuff, or you're on your phone. Like, can you not do that? And you know what? They feel seen and they like being a part of it. And it just helps make sure, because they can really crush something, whether it's a new product, a new program, something.
Yeah. And you have great buy-in, right? I mean, if you've got someone who's a leader there, or even maybe not, so it's a great opportunity for them to step up and give or put in that leadership, right? And be a part of it. So you get some buy-in, and I think it's great. And it works all the way around. Listen, man, we talked a lot prior to this about company alignment, and you've worked with CEOs, and it's really important that the CEO's vision is really brought through the whole system. Everybody who's leading the charge to the executives on the team who are trying to convey that message. So how do you work? How do you do that? Make that balance between the CEO and then making sure that you and the executive team align with that vision throughout the company and your teams?
Yeah, I'm sure in different organizations, the relationship between the executives and the CEO, it could be different. So I could just speak to mine.
Sure.
But, on the executive team at our company, we're the ones crafting what is the vision? Is it still real? What are the values? Do we need to update them? What are the strategic objectives?
Yes.
So when you're inside the room creating it, you're automatically sort of aligned, if you're able to communicate clearly.
Yeah.
But once that happens, how do you keep it? I mean, at a micro level, we're doing a daily huddle every day, 5 minutes. What do you have going on just to stay aligned? We're doing a monthly check-in where we sit down for an hour to 2 hours and we're just reviewing how things are going. We're doing quarterly offsites. So once a quarter, we get away for one day. How did the last quarter go? We review our strategic objectives, which means you have to have strategic objectives. So going into every year, we have a strategic business plan. And none of this, it wasn't like, hey, we decided this and within a month we did it all. This is 5 or 6 years. Let's just try to add one more thing.
Yes.
Let's add a SWOT analysis on the front end. All right, let's incorporate more people. Let's, find a strategic plan methodology that works for us and let's sort of stick with it. And, then you have things to talk about in your check-ins when you have a plan. And so then you're staying aligned because there's 50 things that you're talking about and it's all like, here we are.
That's it, right? I mean, and it moves quick, right? I mean, we're coming up on the new year.
Yeah.
So I remember you talked about this last year. For the executive leaders who are closing out the year this year, and then going into the new year, can you talk about some of the strategies that you employ with, for example, your sales team or your operations team in closing out, measuring what you've accomplished this year, and then how do you go into the next year? I think this is a good conversation for someone who's in this position.
Yeah. You might not actually like my answer, so I just want to warn you there.
It's real.
I would say this to sales leaders.
Yes.
Don't stress out over trying to finish the year super strong and on January 1st, having the plan for the next year.
Okay.
Focus on finishing strong. Be working on a strategic plan. I'd recommend people start strategic planning in September and do a different thing, maybe every 2 weeks, and have 8 things that you're trying to get through. But it's okay to give sales reps their quotas in February. Now, people could disagree with me, but I tell the sales reps in January, February, what I'm generally going to say,
Yeah.
What are your results? What's the pipeline? What's the activity? Like, keep doing those things. That's not going to change. Sales leaders, give yourself some grace, because I find when I give myself some grace or I give myself some space, like to think and end a year strong and then come up with some new ideas. Like before you know it, it's the next year. So I'm so stressed over. And guess what? The reps aren't really doing anything different from December 15th to January 15th, right?
Yes.
So don't overthink it. Still have your check-ins. Your job's to go close deals. Let's go close some deals. Whatever you're going to do in January, you're not going to hit your whole quota no matter what it is. So whether it's 4% one way or the other,
Yeah, you've got to keep the momentum going, right? I mean, you just can't. That's the other thing. The holidays are great. Don't get me wrong, but it's also, I think, a very good time to make up ground. For the matter that a lot of, at least in my space through the years, I felt like a lot of the competitors were kind of sleeping at the wheel at this time. And believe me, there's people still doing business right now. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you do finish the year strong. And as long as you keep that momentum going, you should ride through the first quarter of the year. So that's a real answer. That's what we want on this show. We want reality. I don't want some puffed BS, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. So it's a strategy that works for you. And, we talked about your organization and, what values and principles are you really focused on with your people there? I mean, we've chatted about it, but I'd like you to really talk about that success, because your company in general, at least from us having those discussions, are very aligned on company culture and organizational alignment. Yeah.
I would say probably 7 or 8 years ago, we always had a company purpose, and we had this statement, and a lot of it was built off of Zappos and their how to wow customers and things like that. So we had this purpose, but we never had values. So we went through a process where we had each manager, who are your top, we'd call them keepers, who are the people, these are the keepers. If they said I'm leaving, we have a problem.
Yes. Okay.
And we went to them and just said, what are your personal values? When you operate, maybe you don't officially have them, but what's the lens you make decisions through? Yeah. And we took them all from all our key people, our keepers, and we used that to actually form the values of the company. Because
great.
What is the culture of a company, right? It's like how you make decisions. It's how people feel when they work there. So it would be natural that those people are making decisions. It's already happening. It's not a big jump.
Right.
So we did that. And then we sort of came down to a group of things. We're always learning. We work hard. We're having fun. We're humble. We're doing the right thing. We're nice. Mm-hmm. And, and we tell people, these can be aspirational. You don't have to have them all. None of us do them all perfectly all the time. Perfect, but we have to say, like, I want to do this. Like, if you're like, I don't have that and I have no desire to do that, you're probably not going to like working here.
Yeah, I think that's a really creative way on motivating and really fostering a culture. Because I know we touched on that before, and that's why I wanted to bring it back up. Is it's a really creative way to foster a culture, and believe it or not, I see it now, even in the consulting work and companies I've worked with. You just got to ask sometimes. I think we get so damn busy all the time, right? We're running and trying to put this out and trying to get this sale, and we're trying to move this number, and we're trying to implement. But we never really ask our team members what's important. And I think if you're an executive out there, I really do. I think sometimes you got to put the darn brakes on, and you just have to sit back and grab some of your key players like Jeff just talked about here, and just ask the question. Ask about the values, ask about the success, ask about the programs, all the stuff. I think one thing that we're seeing here commonly is that you're really engaging your team to make some of the decisions for your company. And I think that's what gets lost maybe in the larger companies, because it just gets so big.
Yeah. And one thing we're working on, we use Gallup is an organization. We use them. We do something called a Q12 survey. Yeah. And this is how we sort of assess how's engagement, how are people doing. And one of our latest learnings is that you have to close the loop. So we got really good at asking those questions and talking to people, but we didn't really go back to them to say, hey, when you said that, I was listening. We actually did something. We changed because of it. We would implement things, but we never connected the dots or closed the loop to say, you filled out a survey, then I sat with you. You told me this thing. Did you know that I did this because you said this? So it was like we were doing all this stuff, but we were getting some survey results that would say, do I feel like my opinion matters? And it was like, it wasn't like trending the way we wanted it to trend. And we were like trying to get to the root of it. So what do? Go to the people, talk to them. So we're working on doing that better, even going into 2024. Closing the loop. Sometimes you've already done the work, but if you don't communicate it, you may not even get it.
That's really good advice. All right. So listen, we've got some people who are listening to this and are in your role currently. And we've got some people some professionals, I should say, that are aspiring to move up the ladder. And, what would you say right now, to aiming to get into a leadership role?
Right.
What are specific habits and lessons from your journey that are really critical that you would give, maybe someone who is aspiring to move into an executive or leadership role, or maybe even interviewing for a role right now?
Yeah. I think, I've found that people want people that can get things done. And as much as you think that's like so obvious, I think there's a gap just in the workforce. So if you could be someone that like someone can give a project to or say something's broken, I need it fixed, and you can be like, give it to me, let me do it, I'll fix it. I always say it's better to win at a few things than to like get a C+ on like 40 things. Like, oh, I have all this oversight and I just do like an average job of it. Like, take 3 things, be amazing at them, and that's going to present more and more opportunities. And if you've had a promotion and you're thinking about the next promotion, don't be afraid to go back to the person that you got the promotion from and say like, hey, when I got that promotion, like, what do you think were a couple of the things that like went into me getting that promotion? Because sometimes you don't see what other people see, or you aren't able to articulate it. A lot of times interviewing, it's another version of selling, right? You're selling why I should be the person. So get really good at articulating, the results, where things were before and where things are now as a result of some of the things you did or your team. You're always trying to balance humility in an interview and like your results and accomplishment. And you're like, all right, how do I do this and get the job?
Right. I think you made a really good point here, because when I was a CEO, running the companies I've had, I always had the most respect, and I respected a lot of our people, don't get me wrong. But when somebody really came in and asked questions about things like you just said, hey, how can I do this better? Or basically even sometimes, how did I do? Or I feel like if we did this, it would improve. Being more proactive than just reactive in this scenario. I think for people who are aspiring for those leadership roles, always do more than you're asked. Okay, that's number one. And then two, always really try to get critical feedback on how you did the job. And then three, come to the table with solutions on how you could have done it better.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, I want to hear your feedback. But don't come to me and say, here's a problem. Like, come to me and say, here's a problem. Here's like a couple things I think we should do. You don't have to do them all, but like anybody can complain.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you going to do after that?
Give me the solution.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just give me a couple options to tell me you're thinking about it. Like complaining is lazy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
And I would tell people, don't be afraid to disagree with the CEO or the person in leadership. A lot of times we're looking for someone that's going to push us or poke us. So many times people are just so nice and, oh, thank you so much. And it's like, I want someone that's like, hey, I think you made a left there. You should have made a right. And you're like, oh, well, why do you think that? So don't be afraid to challenge them. A lot of times that's what they're looking for, is someone that's going to challenge the status quo. Because when things aren't working, they're like, all right, we got to do something different. This person thinks differently than everybody else in the room. Right.
It'll show really quick. It was funny. I was in a meeting a few weeks back with the CEO and their team, and this person had brought up a suggestion for a certain market strategy. And the first thing the CEO said was, okay, well, what information do you have to back that up? The person didn't have much. And he respectfully just said, listen, if you're going to come to the table with an idea, I'm all for it, but you got to come to the table with something to back up the data, or have some information about the data that's going to make me want to lean one way or the other on the decision. And I think that's another part, is do your research, everybody. Do your research for sure.
Or just say, I have a hunch, but let me research it. But I think there might be something here, and proactively say, like, I need to do some analysis on it. Yeah. But don't ask an executive to change something with nothing to back it up and no intention of actually figuring it out.
Yeah, I agree.
Ways not to get promoted.
There you go. Coin that one. All right, listen, here's the other thing we're going to get into a little bit. We're going to talk with sales, because you and I worked on this cohort together last year. All right, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but we did a global sales cohort. I mean, we had people in from other countries. We spent 6 months together, had some great leadership, great ideas. And now I want to talk sales, okay? Because we talked about that. And let's talk about sales performance these days, right? I mean, we have a lot of tools, transparency, hitting quotas, hitting numbers. What do you see right now in your top players? What do you see in the difference from the top players versus the people maybe who aren't hitting the quotas? Is there, obviously there's probably a lot of differences, but is there maybe a couple, 2, 3 that just stick out consistently that you could share?
I think I've been doing a lot of research on how people are buying, because I think it's really shifting just in the world, how people are buying and how far along a sales cycle people are. And so I think what sales reps maybe used to do or needed to do has shifted to, if you're going to be successful in sales, you have to have knowledge that someone can't get from Google, or like, what are you bringing to the table? So the best salespeople like really know the stuff they're selling, why someone should buy it, why their product is better than the next person. They really understand that value proposition. Because how else are you going to add value? Someone could go on, the internet, YouTube, Google, and they get themselves so far along. So then it's like, all right, what's really going into the decision as to why someone's buying? And if you're not bridging that gap, you're not really, you're just like everybody else. So I feel like the best people are really like in our market, we distribute supplies to people that run printing businesses on the graphics, digital side.
Yes.
So you can Google best printer for a t-shirt and you get like the 3 places and the 50 people you can buy it from. It's like, so why is someone going to buy it from us or from that salesperson? And it's like being able to think like the person that's buying and really honing that knowledge, I think.
Yeah, I want to expand on that because I think you started off the right research. Do your darn research. Understand what the challenges are of your customers, right? Why are people going to buy? And I think the other thing you're pointing out here is, what makes you different? What are your differentiators? What are things that make you different from the competitor, whether that's timing, whether that's quality, whether that's that's the other thing I think with sales professionals, sometimes they underestimate is their value.
Yeah.
Been in the business for a long time. I know my customers. I know what you need. I'm value as well. So I think that's important. So what you're saying is research is definitely a separator in the approach.
Yeah, just being knowledgeable of what you're talking about. People can tell when it's fake.
Yeah.
And when you're just like, well, I don't need you as a sales rep.
Yeah. Okay. Question for you. Someone's underperforming. All right, man. You got an underperformer. How do you and your team approach underperformers and try to elevate what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, so we were part of this cohort, so credit to Mike Weinberg. He goes back to this, let's sit down on a monthly basis. Let's look at your results. If your results are there, like the meeting's going to be really short. If they're not, like, let's look at the pipe. If the pipe's not there, we have to look at the activity. And I think just like any doctor, I am not a doctor. I don't do well with blood or needles or anything like that. But, you have to know where you're looking to operate first. So you have to understand, I remember having a rep who has been here almost 10 years and she was doing everything right. She was doing the activity. She had the pipeline and she didn't have the results. And it was such a different conversation. I was like, I said to her, I was like, this is like the storm's coming. There's dark clouds everywhere. Like, this is your pipeline. Just wait. It's going to start raining, But it was like she was getting nervous and it was like, I don't have the results. And upon further analysis, pipeline was there, activity was there. And we were like, so she was underperforming and we weren't worried about it because she had all those things. And you know what? She's still here. She's crushing it. Awesome.
Great. That's a great story.
Sometimes you have like this pipeline that's just full. I mean, not full.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, is it that you have the activity? You're just trying to figure out what to do. And then I like to just sort of go through like, all right, let's come up with a mini business plan. What are we going to do in the next month? And what do we need to do and really hone in on it? And there's like a twinge of being a little bit annoying. Like, it's painful enough that it's like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, well, I don't want to do this either.
Yeah. Well, what gets measured gets done. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And, even the teams and the managers, and I know we've talked about this, that I've coached through the years on the front lines with the sales managers and salespeople or sales professionals, how to give me transparency in these numbers. Okay. And it's not for me to point at you and say, are you working? But what it does for us is it identifies where we need to put pressure to help you. Okay. Because if you got somebody who's pushing out a bunch of touches and a bunch of calls and they're not getting appointments, well, we got to start with the dialogue on what your approach is and kind of that research and everything you just talked about earlier. Or if they're getting a lot of appointments, but they're not closing deals and that pipeline's full, well, let's look at the closing strategy. Let's look at how you're approaching your close and your follow-up. So now we can work with you in those areas. So I always encourage transparency is really the key to this because it helps us put pressure in areas so you can improve realistically. And listen, is it going to be hard work? Yeah, it's going to be hard. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. I say get comfortable being uncomfortable with this stuff because that's how you're going to grow in this process. So I love it, man. I love it.
And thinking about like, you're always trying to motivate your top producers, right? Nothing motivates a top producer than an executive walking up to them and say, hey, why do you think you're so successful? why do you think you're so good at what you do? Right? They're getting that feedback of like, oh, this person really appreciates me. But then listen to the answer. Why do they think they've had success? And then think about the people that aren't having success and be like, all right, are they doing some of the things? Because each industry is different. What's making a successful car salesman is not going to make a successful rep at our company, and it's not going to make a successful real estate agent. So those are different things.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. I think that's great. Well, listen, this has been freaking blast. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. And if anyone wants to reach out to you with questions, where can they check you out? LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn. IT
Jeff
Supplies.
Lucido?
Yeah, Jay Lucido at itsupplies.com. But we're on LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel. We have a podcast for people in the pruning profession. If you're not in the pruning profession, this is not the podcast for you.
All right. You heard that. If you're in the printing profession, check it out. If you're not in it, don't check it out.
Yeah. Or check it out, but do not leave comments like, what are they talking about?
And listen, man, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show today. We'll get you back on again in the future and check in next year on those results. Yeah. And appreciate having you.
Awesome. Always a blast. Have a good one.
Always. Listen, everybody, check us out on salesproformance.com. Appreciate you listening. Share this podcast. We appreciate you. And remember, keep working on going pro. See you again soon.